panel, Countering Media Bias. We have two real good speakers who have been with us before. Don Irvine, president of Accuracy in Media. I'm sure a lot of you got to talk with him out in the hall where he had a table earlier during the event. And Malia Zimmerman, editor of Hawaii Reporter and director of the Hawaii Rifle Association. She's also a Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms director. Why? And apparently it's because he's on my panel when we're happy to have him here. Is currently teaching communication strategy at the Baruch College Graduate School of Public Affairs and has had a long career in government and media, and is also a longtime member of the board of the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms. I hope everybody else knew about this because now you all got about 4 minutes. And we'll start with Herb.
Well, I'm the add-on, so I'll try to be brief. Greetings from my hometown, New York, the home of the New York Times, the home of Bloomberg and his media empire, Bloomberg LP, and of course the headquarters of ABC, CBS, NBC, but also Fox. So I came up with a list of what I hope are helpful tips in countering media bias in your community. Most of you will have known some of these. For others, it might be a helpful reminder, and maybe you'll pick up just a few tips you hadn't thought about. Number one is if you've been hit with media bias, coverage of your organization or of the gun issue, letters to the editor. I got a letter into the New York Times a few years ago because the nonprofit I was running was unfairly covered in the New York Times. Times, of course, devotes the first half of the letter to restating their position, but still, intelligent readers can get a sense that, hey, maybe there's another side to this story. So they did print my letter several years ago. The alternative, especially if you live in a big city, it's tougher to get into those letter sections. Those are very coveted spots, is a blog, which you can start yourself, or you can attach yourself to someone else's blog. Online comments. So if you were unfairly treated by the Atlanta Constitution, maybe you can get a letter to the editor, but more likely you don't, but you can add your comments to some of their coverage, so that online readers can read those. If you've been seriously misquoted, or if you really get a sense of factual errors, not just, opinion tossed in, try a retraction. I think too few people on our side try retractions. And one thing I was proud of in my youth when Alan Gottlieb and I were young volunteers in Jim Buckley's campaign for U.S. Senate in 1970. Some of the old-timers may remember that. New York Times wants to know how we got so many volunteers involved, did a story on it, misquoted me horribly. And I got a retraction at age 20 from the New York Times. So you can do it in your community if that happens to you. Op-eds, something I'm teaching my class right now. A great opportunity for you or for somebody who's got that journalistic or writing bent in your organization. And now there are a lot more web op-eds, the Daily Caller and all that, who can give you, if not an op-ed, an opportunity to put a column in. And once you get that published, then post it on Facebook, post it on Twitter. I had an op-ed that Newsday was good to give me a full page on a Sunday within the last year. Was on a fiscal issue, though not on a gun issue. I put that on Facebook later. I got more responses from the Facebook posting than there were responses in Newsday itself. If you've been hit with media bias in your community, call the reporter. If that doesn't work, think about calling the editor or the news director to point out how you've been victimized by unfair coverage. Do it with reason. Don't start off angry. Make yourself, without whining, the victim. We've been wronged. We want you to cover this in a different way. There is another side to this issue. Think about joining a local press association. I'm an associate member of the New York Press Club in part because I worked in media for 6 years very early in my career. But that also gets you to humanize yourself and the issue and your organization with people in the press, and they can see you interacting with them in a much more human way. Here's a suggestion I have, a great opportunity for student interns. Monitor coverage. And maybe you could partner with another organization, maybe on another issue, a tax issue or something where you have some sort of common cause in opposing some of your local politicians. You find the media is tilting their coverage toward those people and against your organization. It would be a great project. A student intern might even be able to get credit for doing something like that in covering, in monitoring the coverage from your local TV stations, radio stations, and newspapers. And even now, increasingly, websites, as Malia will be talking about her great success with her website. Humanize your organization. Humanize yourselves, the people that you're presenting to the media. Defang them. Defang your gun group. You said Alan Corwin had some great points with the language. What is it? Hopophobia? Was it hopophobia? What is it? Hoplophobia. Yeah, I left the L out. That's great. When you're visiting a TV station or a newspaper, maybe, and you're nervous about it, think about the successful meetings you had visiting elected officials, because the approach is and the goal is somewhat similar. You're trying to persuade a fence-sitting politician toward your viewpoint, or somebody who's maybe been against you 60% of the time, and you want to move them to being against you 20 or 30% of the time. Don't presume, this is Sarah Brady as the news director, that the TV station is just against you ideologically. They're lazy, they're very, very busy, and they're subject to the popular culture like everybody else. You're there to persuade them to the other side with your facts. When you visit, don't go in with three guys who look like me, white guys with gray hair, if you can avoid it. Think about bringing some of the minority group members from your organization, women, and so you're rounding out and presenting a diverse view, presenting the community as it really is. On the calls to the media outlets, and I should have made this point earlier, consider that politicians do this regularly. I know that governors and mayors whose operations I've known about in New York, they have people whose job is basically to harangue the press into giving them better coverage. And so, and they succeed to some extent because their operations are part of corporations. They're citizens, corporate citizens within the community. They don't want the mayor, the governor, whomever to be mad at them. So they succeed when they have these people calling and leaning on these folks. So our side can do the same thing. You can, whether it's you or somebody else who's more persuasive, it's up to you. Finally, know your audience. Your audience being the media outlet that you're seeking to influence. And I have the Orlando paper. If you want to get a letter to the editor published here in the Orlando paper, similar to very many others, take a look at today's paper. It's got a few leading letters that are about 3 or 5 paragraphs. Almost all the others are 1 or 2 paragraphs. This is tough for us who have such passion about this issue. We want to refer them to 8-page studies. And remember what I said before. Folks in the media, many of them are lazy, and they're all busy. So here it is. So they give 3 paragraphs to reward the workers. They want to raise wages in some way. Most of the others here are these little 1-page, 1-paragraph letters. So look at the letters, look at the op-eds. An op-ed usually 750 words. I was fortunate Newsday gave me a full page on Sunday, but that was a rarity. And even look at Bill O'Reilly at the end. Doesn't he have, the letter bag, mail bag? And he stresses, if you want to get in or opine, be pithy. And so, actually not long ago, I saw a friend of mine from Virginia got his comments into Bill O'Reilly's mailbag, a 1 or 2 sentence line. So know your audience in the media, the guy you're trying to get some placement with. So it may be a 750-word op-ed, a 1-paragraph letter, or a 1 or 2 line comment to get onto a show like Bill O'Reilly. So I hope those tips are helpful. Good luck to all of you.
Malia, and then we'll have Don back cleanup, as they say.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for sticking around for the late panel. I'll just start off because Herbie covered a lot of things with the traditional media. Let me just give you a few stories about working in the media. Of course, we're in Hawaii, but media everywhere is similar throughout the nation. Some places it's more provincial than others. But let me just explain to you maybe what some of the media are thinking or going through. For example, the President of the United States was recently in Hawaii. And we, as the media, were invited to a press conference that he had at this hotel that was kind of about an hour out of our main city. And so we all thought, well, sure, we'll go. And we started naively, preparing our questions for the President of the United States. And, one of the reporters there said, we're never going to be allowed to ask any questions, but we were optimistic. Well, maybe we'll get in one question, because the whole day took 7 hours for us to get on a bus and of course go through all the security with the dogs and so on, and sitting around for hours and hours. And then once we get there, sitting there waiting longer on the bus, and then waiting long for the President. And finally he comes. But while I was sitting there, I sat in the third row. And in the first 2 rows, it was reserved for the White House press corps. And I saw, the neat thing about sitting there was I saw the White House staffer going from media person to media person to media person saying, what's your question for the President? And, then she put them in the order that she thought they should go in, and also determined which ones would be allowed to ask a question and which ones would not. And that just showed me how much control there is of the media these days. And in the old days, the media would have said, screw you. We're not going to tell you our question. We are allowed to ask the questions we want to ask. But it's gotten to the point where if you want access, especially to somebody powerful, a lot of times you're censored as a reporter, or you're controlled before you even get there. And if you don't play the game, right, if they either have to stick together and all say we're not going to do it, or they're going to have to be knocked off one by one. And in this particular press conference, we had one reporter from CNN saying, Mr. President, you're just so wonderful. You're the most wonderful president. I mean, he didn't exactly say that, but that was his attitude. And the one reporter that stood up and asked a tough question, the president really came after him and said, well, because of your question, you knocked off the next reporter, and we're cutting it off right here. So it was really interesting the thing that was amazing about this was the whole world was there, right? You had the reporters from all around the world, because it was an APEC conference, which is the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Conference. And he's doing this in front of the reporters from China and all over the world. So, just to give you an idea. Now, another reason that, that kind of an article can come out in a way that you don't think is appropriate, you can have public officials telling you a story that might not be true. And of course, it's the reporter's job to get down to the bottom of that. But when you have, for example, in our town, we've had our police chief, not the current police chief, but a police chief that was in there that was so anti-gun. He was determined to ban 50 caliber rifles. That was his calling. There's only 125 in Hawaii. There's never been a crime with a 50 caliber rifle, but he was determined. And that was just the way he was going to get in and try to erode gun rights. And so what he would do is at press conferences, he'd hold press conferences about this terrible, terrible, terrible weapon. And he would get out all the pieces of it and be putting it together really slowly so the camera got it. And then he would make these wild claims like the bullet from a 50 caliber rifle can go 8 miles. And if it did, look on the map where it would go. And he shows how the bullet could go over mountains and, through water and finally end up hurting somebody. And so us as reporters, we had to figure out, well, that's, go get the other side or go get to the truth. And most reporters, did, but he still gets away with this. And the picture on the news that night is what? Him with this rifle, right? Putting this together and so on. So that, at least to the media's credit, at least in that case, most of them would challenge him, but still he'd end up with the pictures. So how do you kind of, counter that in your own town? And I think, we have a lot of suggestions during this whole conference. But some of the things you can do is in your own town, just look at the media coverage, look at who's writing these stories, look and research these reporters. You can Google them really easily And of course, don't believe anything Media Matters says about that reporter, because that's I think it's Hillary Clinton's operation. But look and really see, what kind of articles are they writing? What kind of comments are they getting in the letters to the editor? And if they look like an approachable reporter, call them, start to make contact with them, and really start to get a handle on, are they biased? Do they need more information? Or are they Second Amendment people? And you might be able to find advocates that way. Because I know a lot of times people don't think reporters are human, but we are. Set the record straight on that. And, you can really make a difference in your own town by calling the radio stations, making comments. You can even start your own operation like we did in Hawaii. We had such bias in the media when it came to anything political and, and anything to do with Second Amendment, that we actually started our own whole news operation. So if you don't want to go that extreme, there's still a lot of things that you can do to make a difference in your town. And if you have any questions after, I'm happy to talk to you about any particular problems that you've had or any opportunities that you might want to look into. Thank you.
All right, I think Herb and Malia have covered a great deal of territory here. So one of the things I want to say is that I'm assuming that this room, we're pretty much in agreement that there actually is something as media bias to begin with. But it's not just us as conservatives, I can't use Alan's pro-gun term, I guess, but pro-firearm or pro-rights as he said this morning. It's not just that, there are others. We just held a conference on Friday, talking about, President Obama. And one of our speakers was Pat Cadell, and he's the former pollster for Jimmy Carter. And at that conference, he came out with one of the strongest speeches I've ever heard from a liberal, where he basically called the press the enemy of the American people. And actually, that's hitting the internet very hard today, and we're going to see some great results of that. But the public doesn't trust the media anymore. A Gallup poll just recently came out. 60% of the people that were polled said that they have little faith or no faith in the media. So we can see that this tide is turning. And that 60% probably will continue to go higher as the years pass on, I think. We have not seen the peak of that distrust, that lack of faith in the media. But as far as tips, I think as Herb said, we've got a lot of different ways of doing things, around here. One of the things I suggest really in regard to all this and trying to tie this all together is taking a word or pair of words that was used by the former public editor to the New York Times, Arthur Brisbane, when he wrote in a column in January. He asked whether or not the New York Times should be a truth vigilante, and he was excoriated for saying these things. But I think that's something that maybe we can take to heart, is that let's be truth vigilantes. Let's go out there and look for the truth. The media obviously is conflicted. They're having a problem trying to figure out what the truth is and whether or not they should tell the truth. Arthur Brisbane, he surely wasn't, he was confused. He wasn't sure, should the New York Times reporters try to choose one fact or another? Why not just choose all the facts and report all the facts? Why do you have to choose? I don't get this. But be the media. This is an opportunity. We live in a day and age now, a time when we can do things, using the internet in particular. Another poll that has a recent study that just came out just shows how much the media landscape has shifted. I think we all know that newspapers are having a hard time. And this last study said that 46% of the people in this poll said that they read their news online at least 3 times a week. And there were only 38% of those polled said they actually read a newspaper. So you're seeing this shift, and this shift I think will continue on because, it's so easy to get the news, whether or not it's on an iPad, a phone, your computer. This is the trend that is happening. So now we have that opportunity to go and take that and use that, whether or not it is starting a blog. And blogs don't have to be long. The nice thing about blogs is just that, one of my shortest post probably was 5 words and a picture, because the picture was telling the story. I didn't need to say anything else but just kind of frame it and just say, that's it. You can do that. If you don't really like to write, then, take a portable video camera or something like that and start shooting some video. put that out there. That stuff goes viral so quickly, but you can show the other side of things that aren't happening. If you're at a news event, have your own camera there. Take some pictures, take some video, shoot it, see kind of what happens, and then report it. But even better, why wait till the media reports the story? If you're at a gun event or whatever political event, shoot your own video and get that up there before they do. Beat them to the punch. That'll do them more damage than anything else out there, I think. So I think you have these wonderful opportunities. I love social media. I know that Malia is very big into this. I guess Herb is also into this based on his comments about Facebook. I started a Facebook page last year, Media Bias Against Guns. And so we've got, 100 or so likes or members on that thing. And we trade information there. We use that as a kind of a repository, as a source to do that. It's there for you to use. It's there for you to contribute to, and to share information with. But you can do so much. There's more people are now getting their news also through social media, whether or not it's a Google Plus account or Tumblr, Facebook or Twitter. Even the media uses social media to get their news. A lot of them have admitted they don't even bother reading the newspaper in the morning. They don't bother looking at their own network. They're just looking at their phone and seeing what's coming to them via Twitter or Facebook. You have an opportunity to do that. That is so easy to start and to do. And one other thing I thought maybe it would be an interesting experiment for this audience, if we could do this, as we try to get to know our local reporters, is the thought occurred to me is that how many of these reporters, whether or not they're local or national, do you think have ever picked up or fired a gun, a sidearm? I bet you not too many. But the opportunity there is maybe if you're really, want to go and try this, why don't you go, and get to know someone and call them up and talk to them and maybe invite them to the range and show them and take them out for half a day. It's not that expensive. They can probably afford it themselves. But let's show them what it's like to own a sidearm, to fire a sidearm, to show that this is about safety, this is about rights, it's about our freedom. And you might be able to change their mind just a little bit. And the more that we can work on them to do that, I think the better off we'll be. So as that poster out there that says, I love that poster, what was it? Keep calm and carry. Let's do it.